I am extremely excited to welcome this next guest to the Draymond Green Show. Guy who I've been a fan of since high school, man. Watching this man run off a million screens at Duke. I'm going to read this bio because it's so long, and I wouldn't be doing him any justice if I didn't read this. And a McDonald's All-American at Cave Spring High School in Roanoke, Virginia. Scored 43 points as a senior in the Virginia High School League 3A state championship victory, which was a record until Matt McClung beat it by scoring 47 in 2A championship. He set ACC records for most points scored, most ACC tournament points scored during his time at Duke, total points scored, which was later beat by Tyler Hansbrough, Duke's all-time leading scorer, which is saying a whole bunch considering the history of that program, as we all know, top of the top when talking men's college basketball. Consensus National Player of the Year in 2006, which I take a little offense to this consensus because I was National Player of the Year, but definitely wasn't consensus. Two-time Rupp Award winner, two-time ACC Player of the Year, and he had his number retired at Duke at Cameron Indoor, February 4th, 2017. Went on to be drafted 11th overall by the Orlando Magic in the 2006 NBA draft, 7 seasons with the Magic, 4 seasons with the Clippers, 2 with the 76ers, 2 with the Pelicans, and he finished it off with the Dallas Mavericks. A career 41.5% three-point shooter, 17th all-time, and he made the playoffs in his first 13 seasons. I am honored to have the latest media personality that we're all enjoying watching. JJ, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Draymond, what a pleasure to be on this show, especially early on. I got the early ask. This is a big deal. I should add a couple things to my bio, and I appreciate you espousing all of my my records and whatnot. I was also McDonald's game MVP. I like to point that out.
God.
I like to point that out. And you forgot 2 very somewhat forgettable months that I spent in Milwaukee in between the Magic and the Clippers. In between the Magic and the Clippers. I actually enjoyed Milwaukee, the city, just from a basketball perspective. It wasn't my best. I
definitely respect that. And JJ, as someone who I view as a pioneer in this space, when talking current athletes doing a podcast, I think you've been doing one now for the last 4 or 5 years, throughout the last 4 or 5 years of your career. And that's kind of where I'm at. I think I'll go another 5, 6 years and then kind of start transitioning out. But what advice do you have for myself and other players that's trying to break into this space and stay consistent while continuing to play at a high level?
It's a great question because I know that you previously tried to do a podcast and you did a few episodes, and that's the first piece of advice. If you're going to do this and do it right, you have to be consistent. Even prior to us launching Old Man and the Three last summer in August, in the middle of the bubble, I had done 3 seasons with The Ringer, and I only did about 25 or 30 episodes a year. And unless it was a big name, the viewership, the listenership, the ad revenue, all that stuff, it wasn't consistent. The only time it was consistent previously was when I launched the first one, which was with Yahoo. I did 41 episodes, and it was 41 straight weeks. And I saw the audience grow. I saw the community grow. I made a little money doing that. But it's hard as an NBA player, and we have Duncan Robinson under our umbrella, our podcast umbrella. And look, he was in the middle of a slump and was like, I need to take 2 weeks off. By all means, basketball is first. And I said that the very first episode back in February of 2016. I said, look, if this ever interferes with basketball, I'm out.
Yes, sir.
Basketball is my number 1 priority. And I expect that it'll be the same for you. But the consistency is key.
I appreciate that because for me, like you said, doing it the first time that I tried it, you're right. Like I did it 1 week and then I'm like, my schedule don't really work this week. I can't really fit it in. Maybe we can go next week. And before you know it, it's been 1 episode in a month. And then, after that month, we try to come back around and do it again. And the consistency wasn't there. But that had to be maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. I also wasn't in a place in my career where I truly understood the in and outs of the NBA, the in and outs of the schedule, how to really manage my time. I didn't understand any of that. And so it ended up being an absolute struggle. And I told myself, I said, I will not get back in the podcast game until I am ready to manage the schedule, until I am ready to fully commit to it. Because in my mind, I'm like, I fucked this up once. Like, you don't get many chances to fuck something up and still have an opportunity to do it later. And so I fucked this up once. I have to get it right this time.
So to that point, I really experienced this in the last 15, 16 months with Old Man and the Three. Because at one point when we first launched, we were starting from zero. We couldn't take our RSS feed. I didn't own the IP on the previous iteration at JJ Redick podcast. So we were starting with a subscriber base of zero, an audience of zero. So we were pumping out a ton of content originally. We were doing like 2 weeks an episode for the first 3 or 4 months. Once the season started, we went back to once a week. And I feel like you get into a rhythm. And generally speaking, we record on Monday or Tuesday. We pump it out Wednesday or Thursday. And you do all the prep work, which takes time. Mm-hmm. You know, I do all the prep work. I do all the creative, the writing, all that stuff. That takes time. And that could take anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, depending on the guest. And then you record the episode, which is an hour. You have your team edit it. They do the breakout videos, all that stuff. And then you don't have to worry about it for 4 or 5 days. It decreases in priority. And then Sunday night, you're like, all right, I got to get back on this shit. I got to figure, all right, we got this person this week. Let me start prepping. I carry my phone around with me, obviously. If I have an idea for the guest, I pump it in my notes, and then I do all my prep work, usually day of, to be honest with you. I like having everything fresh in my mind. The other piece of advice, and I don't really need to give you this piece of advice, but I thought of this as you were talking. You know, one of the reasons I started this was because I wanted to control the narrative. And you've seen your guy, KD, start his own podcast, and he's been big on controlling the narrative around him. I wanted to control my own narrative, but I also wanted to learn how to own my own voice. Mm-hmm. And that is a skill. That is a skill. And it's not a skill that happens immediately. I think you're at the place in your career and in your life where you've done that. Any time I've seen you in a press conference or on an appearance with Turner, like, I know who Draymond is. You're consistent with who you are. And I think the audience always responds to someone owning their voice.
I appreciate that. That's something that I've been big on, is just wanting to stay myself and not do anything that kind of drags me away from that. So I definitely appreciate that. But speaking in the lights of, just speaking on basketball, obviously you and I both know, it's funny, we were in practice today, and one of the coaches came up to me. He's like, hey, man, it just dawned on me. He's like, do you realize everyone in the NBA can hit a three today? Like, literally every guy in the league, because shooting is at such a premium that if you watch any guy's workouts, they're shooting 3-pointers. You have Dwight Howard. I watched one of Dwight Howard's workouts. It literally consisted of mostly 3-point shots. And I'm not sure if I agree with that. Obviously Dwight's a Hall of Famer, so no disrespect to Dwight, but that's the league that we're in. Is so 3-point heavy. But for yourself, who is one of the greatest 3-point shooters that we've seen in this league, who do you rank in your top 5 3-point shooters to come through this league?
Oh, that's easy. Steph is first.
I respect that.
Everybody else is way down the list to me. In no particular order. The other 4, it's Clay, Kyle Korver, Ray Allen, Reggie Miller. To me, those are the guys. Because when we talk about great shooters, I don't want to disparage the previous iteration of 3-point shooters in the 80s or the 90s. But those guys were not shooting the shots we take today. Those guys were not taking the difficult shots we were taking, nor were they shooting it at the volume. So yes, a guy like Tim Legler, great shooter. He shot, I think, 55.6% one year to lead the league. But he wasn't shooting the shots Clay was shooting. He's not shooting the shots Kyle Korver was shooting. And that's not a knock on Tim. It was a different game, and the game has evolved. And now we put such a premium on generating three-point looks. Mm-hmm. It's not just about the quality of the look. It's the volume of looks. If Steph Curry, and Tom Haberstroh always talks about this, I think Steph's up to like 15, almost 15 a game this year. Yeah. Tom's always been like, Steph needs to shoot 20 a game. Because you do the math on that, those 20 shots equal about 27 points on average. Yeah. On average.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because I was talking to Bob Myers a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me, like, Steph's 3-point shots are getting up. But all of my analytical guys tell me, every time I ask him, like, how many threes was Steph at? Man, he said, all my analytical guys, they tell me, well, he's getting up there, but we need him at 20 a game. I'm like, number one, 23-point shots a game. That is brutal on the body, man.
Yes. And he's already putting in enough work to get his shot off, to get his clips off.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of work on the body, but I think it is very interesting of where we see the league going. I remember going back to my first 2, 3 years, 4 years in the league. Everybody's like, they're a jump shooting team. You can never win that way. Right. You can never win shooting jump shots. And within 1 year, we went from like taking the most threes to like 16th in the league because everybody's like, oh man, we need to take more threes. So it's been very interesting to see that growth in the game. But something you just said really hit home with me, and comparing the older generation to the newer generation and how the game actually worked. Because you see all the numbers of Steph passing Reggie Miller and going to pass Ray Allen, so he's done it in like half the amount of games. And it's going to be interesting because, as you just said, and I agree, Steph,
the way he goes about things, I don't want to disrespect any other shooter as someone who's not a shooter myself, but I think Steph is like in a farly different category than anyone else just because of the difficulty of shots. He's shooting them off the dribble. He's shooting them off the catch. He's shooting them off the spot. He's shooting them from 30 feet out each and every time he shoots the ball. But when you look at a guy like Trae Young, a guy like Donovan Mitchell, these guys who's come into the league taking threes at this rate from the very beginning of their career, they're going to pass Steph's number in 500 games. And yet I don't think that's necessarily going to tell the story of Steph being the greatest shooter alive and greatest shooter ever. But yeah, he changed the game. Like, what's your take on that?
Well, so I was going to bring this up when you were talking earlier just about your first few years and them saying jump shooting teams can't win. When I look at the evolution of the three-point shot, the two teams I think of that sort of started this were the Phoenix Suns with Steve Nash and Quentin Richardson, Joe Johnson, Sean Marion, and then my Orlando Magic teams, which by accident we ended up starting Richard and Turk together because Tony Battie hurt his shoulder in training camp. So we were 4 out, 1 in with Dwight. If you look at the numbers of those teams would be at the bottom of the league right now in three-point attempts. Yeah, bottom of the league. To your point about Trae and Donovan and just really the next generation of players, I'm 15th right now in three-pointers made all time, right? Which is crazy. In 10 years, I'll be outside the top 50 probably. I'm being realistic on that. I mean, it's the volume is so different now. The other thing I would say about Steph, to your point about him, the shots he takes, my bag generally was coming to my right shoulder, left-right plant. You know this. Everything was run on the left side, me coming left-right plant, shooting over that shoulder, away from the defense so they couldn't bother my shot. All right. Then alpha DHOs and sort of step-up pick and rolls, a 1 or 2 dribble pull-up 3. That was my bag, right? Kyle Korver, a lot of the same, right? Clay, a lot of the same. Absolutely. Reggie, a lot of the same. Ray Allen, to a degree, had some off-the-dribble bounce. But at the end of his career, when he was shooting a lot of threes, a lot of the same. Steph, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. The only guy that shoots it even remotely like Steph, and I'm not saying one's better than the other or that he's that far behind Steph, is Dame. Yes. Dame is the only guy to me that in some way emulates what Steph does from the three-point line.
I agree 100%. It's interesting that you say you'll in 5 to 7 years you'll be at 50. And that's interesting because it's actually going to be some guys higher than you that we wouldn't consider a shooter. Like, yeah, he can hit the three, but we wouldn't really consider him a shooter. And that's just kind of where the game is going. But you speak of your Orlando Magic team with you, Turk, and Rashard Lewis. Ryan Anderson ended up coming along on that team and stretching the floor. Jameer Nelson. Now, guys that could really fill it up from outside, but like you said, will be at the bottom today. But looking back on your career, and obviously we had some battles in your Clipper days, we're kind of right there in that space of, man, who's next up in the West, right? Like, is the Clippers are next up in the West, then you had us coming about like, we want to have something to say about that. And early in those years, we really didn't. You guys think y'all beat us in the Game 7 one year, and y'all really had it going. But what was your favorite team to play with and that you felt like had the best chance to win a championship? Obviously, y'all went to the finals with Orlando, but I feel like some of those Clipper teams we all thought will have a legit chance at winning a championship.
I would say this. When I look back at my career, the years I'm most fond of were my Clipper days for a number of reasons. Number one, because we were good. Mm-hmm. Number two, because it really was the type of basketball that I like, which is you had 5 guys pretty much at all times on the floor that complemented each other. It's what makes your team so great. It's what makes the Warriors team so great. The players, the pieces, they complement each other. They fit together. And our guys, especially those first 2 years when we had Matt, we really fit together. There was an intelligence required to play against us.
Yes.
We were very smart. We had wink, wink, nod, nods on every ATO, on every after free throw play. We had a counter to every play. That's fun basketball to me, is just, using your brain a little bit too. Honestly, though, the team I thought was going to win was actually the year after we made the finals in Orlando.
Yes.
The 2010 team. So we finished the regular season 33-8. We swept the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So we're 41-8 going to the conference finals. Boston had a little bit of a rough stretch during the regular season with some injuries. So we had home court in the conference finals, and they win the first 2 games. And we're playing catch up the rest of the way. We lose in game 6. But that team, to me, that was a lost opportunity. You look back, you won't have this because you've won, but I'm sure you'll look back and say, oh, we maybe let that one get away. Maybe it was 16 for you or something like that.
Absolutely.
That team. But I look back, and especially those first 2 years before you guys had evolved into the 2016 team and then the 2017 team with Kevin that first year, those first 2 years with the Clippers, those were golden opportunities. We were as good as anybody in basketball.
100%. I mean, we're coming up against you guys, and like I said, everybody's kind of tagging y'all as the next young guys up to go win championships with yourself and CP, DeAndre, Blake. I'm not sure which year Matt Barnes was on there, but I think that was early on.
Yeah, those are the first 2 years Matt was on those teams. Yep,
absolutely. I mean, I think y'all definitely had just as good a chance as anyone. And I think for me, 2016, you're right. I'll always beat myself up about that one, and not because we lost or not because like I got suspended or the way it went down. Like, I don't have any regrets about any of that stuff. But the regret I do have is how we had a golden opportunity to not only be 73-9, but win the NBA Finals, put together the absolute best year in NBA history, and we let that one fall by the wayside. So that one fucking beats me down.
So Doc had this comment, and I want to touch a little bit on that 2016 Finals, because Doc had this comment after you guys won in 15. That winning a championship requires a little bit of luck. And of course, you guys are prideful. I think Clay was probably the most outspoken about that, which he always is. I said something the other day on ESPN about you guys not having the hardest schedule. And Clay reacted to that. I'm like, Clay, I'm your biggest fan, dude. Chill the fuck out. But anyways, when you look back at that 16 series, what Doc was saying was there's certain things that have to go in your favor. I look at the Sixers series when we lost to the Raptors.
Yes.
And Kawhi's shot.
Yes.
That's an unlucky bounce of all unlucky bounces. And if you look at that 16 series, you guys are up 3-1. LeBron steps over you. You react. You could call that unlucky. You get suspended. Yes. Bo gets banged up. You could call that unlucky. LeBron and Kyrie for 3 straight games play out of their fucking minds. LeBron makes one of the greatest blocks, defensive plays in NBA history.
Yep.
So those are all things that went in their favor against you guys. And you lose by basically a buzzer beater, right?
Yep.
So not a buzzer beater, but he made it with 40 seconds or whatever it was on the clock. Kyrie's step back. So there's so many things that are required to go in your favor. And when you start adding up a bunch of things in a 7-game series, shit happens and you may lose. And that to me was what kept happening with our Clippers teams.
Yeah.
14, we're playing game 5 at OKC. I think we're up 9 or 11 with 4 minutes to go. We make some like Chris made 3 plays I've never seen him make before.
Was that the one where he tried to take the foul and he threw the ball and they didn't call a foul?
Yes. And then, so that he makes that play. Then he fouls Westbrook on a 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why we're fouling Westbrook on a 3. And then we have a chance. We're down 1. We have a chance to win, and he turns the ball over. Have you ever seen CP turn the ball over?
He doesn't make those mistakes.
No, he doesn't make those mistakes. Then 15, we're up 3-1. We're at home. We're up 19 in the second half. Josh Smith hits 3 threes in the fourth quarter. Corey Brewer hits 2 threes in the fourth quarter. We lose that game. Okay, 16. I've talked about this before. I don't know that we would have beat you guys, but Steph hurts his knee.
Yeah.
He's a little banged up. There's this window right before we play, I think it's game 4, right before we play game 4, where we're like, oh, we got a shot. Let's win this game. Let's take care of business, go home, play the Warriors. Within 10 minutes in the second half, Blake tears his quad tendon and CP breaks his wrist. The following year in the first round, we're up 2-1 against Utah. Blake tears his plate in his foot. Those are the type of shit you can't overcome if you want to win a championship. So there is an element of whatever you want to call it, but there is an element of luck. And certainly in our league, you have to have a Steph Curry. You have to have a LeBron James, a Kevin Durant, a Kawhi Leonard to win. But you also have to have some things go in your favor in a playoff series.
No, 100%. Coach Izzo used to always say that to us, actually. It's like, when March come around, you got to be clicking on all cylinders, and you always need a little bit of luck. And like you said, that's health. That's a bounce by Kawhi Leonard. That is definitely all of those things. So I actually agree. I think and looking back on it now, we can all look back on it and say, Doc was 100% right. I think at that time for us, where it's coming like, oh, it's Doc, it's coming from the Clippers. we we all hate each other, right? Like it's this NorCal versus SoCal thing that's coming together. It's the Steph Chris Paul thing at the time, where it's like is Steph coming up to surpass Chris Paul? Chris Paul kind of raised Steph with the whole North Carolina ties. And so I think once you look at all of that back then, it's like, oh, here's Doc slighting us, right? Like here's Doc taking a shot at us. But looking back on it, no, 100% accurate. You definitely need a little bit of luck and some things to go your way. But JJ, you've had the opportunity to play with 2 incredible, probably more, but 2 for sure incredible big men, and Dwight Howard, who is 100% a Hall of Famer, who was actually left off that NBA 75 list, which I thought was fucking ridiculous, because if you're leaving him off that list, you're leaving him off the list because of his last 5 years, right? But you can't be leaving him off that list due to what he did in those first 11 years. And in the last 5 years, whoop-de-doo, he hasn't been the player that he was, but he won a fucking championship. So he really stamped that resume, regardless of how you want to talk about it or go say, oh, well, he wasn't the star of that team or whatever. He fucking won a championship. He contributed to that championship after essentially reviving his whole career, having to revive, just really revive it. He was leaving Washington
buying into a role. He had to buy into a role that wasn't his role for his first 11 years. And that took a few seasons to get there, but he bought into that role.
It takes a lot
I
of
said
guys.
this on my podcast. That was the most egregious error. And there's a bunch of guys you can make an argument for. I could go down the list, and I know Clay's been joking around wearing 77 in practice or whatever. But like, no, that's not an affront to Clay or you or Tracy McGrady or Vince or anybody else. But Dwight was the guy that should have been on that list. Yes. And I always say this: narrative matters so much. And there's two things that happen in Dwight's career. You just mentioned one, which is starting sort of in Houston. There was a narrative around him as a teammate, as a leader. And then the second thing is he was the best player in 2011.
Absolutely.
He was second in MVP that year. Derrick Rose got it. But if by any advanced metric, Dwight was the best player in the league that year. But because the Bulls had this incredible turnaround, Derrick sort of came out of nowhere that year. And I'm not discrediting Derrick's MVP by any means, but had Dwight won the MVP that year, you couldn't have left him off the list.
Nope, sure couldn't have. You sure couldn't have
left him off the list.
No, and that is a fact. So, but when you say out of the guys you play with, Dwight and Joel, who I also think is an incredible young bid, not quite Hall of Famer yet because he has to continue to stamp that resume and add on to it, but definitely has Hall of Fame potential, has the game. But with those guys, two totally different bigs though. Like Dwight's catching lobs, and at that time in Orlando, like you would dump the ball into the post to Dwight, and he jump hooks, but not as heavy as Joel. Like, I mean, the whole entire offense is ran around Joel in Philly. But what were your experience of playing with those two guys? Two, I think, different experiences, but a little similar.
I think the similarity between the two is that in different ways, by the way, but the similarity is they could anchor a top 5 defense. When they were on the floor, Dwight in his prime, and certainly Joel now, he can anchor a top 5 defense. You could put 4 smart players around them, and you can have a top 5 defense. Offensively, very different. And even though we did throw the ball to Dwight a lot of his strength was based on the way he moved, his quickness, his explosiveness. That's not really Joel's game. Joel is certainly nimble. I would describe him as agile and nimble, but Joel's skill at his size, I mean, you could probably name 2 or 3 guys in NBA history at his size that can do the things he does.
Absolutely.
And so it was a very different experience playing with both. But it was a very rewarding experience because, as you know, playing against me, like I thrived when I had a 5 to play 2-man with. And I started running maybe my 4th year. Yeah, my 4th year, I started running that elbow action on the left side with Dwight.
Absolutely.
Where I'm going to get a DHO. If the big steps up, I'm throwing the pocket pass.
Mm-hmm.
If the big lays back, I got to pull up Jay, going to my right hand. And I had that with Joel. We evolved it with Joel. I'm not saying I was the first to do this, but that inverted screen and roll.
Yes.
So when everybody started top locking me, and you're not coming off to your right hand. Well, my guy's got his back turned.
Mm-hmm.
Dwight's guy can't see me, or Joel's guy can't see me, and I would just gently walk my guy into Joel's defender. And he's so smart. He had like this innate sense because, his back's turned to me. Mm-hmm. He had this innate sense when he turned of when I was being top block and he'd come off and get a dunk. I also ran that a little bit with Ben, but obviously that's more of a 1-2 inverted action, which a lot of teams run. But that inverted big pick and roll was sort of the evolution. And truthfully, Dwight probably couldn't have done that. He didn't have the ball skills and the dribbling skills to really pull that off. But those are, I go down the list of the best players I played with, and Dwight and Joel are at or near the top of the list.
No, that's beautiful. And for all our listeners out there, we are headed into Thanksgiving in a couple days. JJ has a house full coming tomorrow, so we have to let JJ go. I could sit here and talk basketball with you all day as an incredible basketball mind that you are, but also as the incredible radio, TV personality that you have become. I think is beautiful. You are extremely intellectual. You know the game in and out, and your resume obviously speaks for itself. So I'll let you out of here on this one. Tough. Do guys fear LeBron more on the court, or are they fearing going up against you on TV? Because you're obviously fucking trending for killing people, man. I mean, what's more to fear here, JJ?
Well, I think this takes the conversation full circle, actually, and that's just that's owning your voice, owning your truth, and
absolutely.
You know, my truth is based upon two things: my experience. So obviously, my truth is very personal, but it's also based on observation. Mm-hmm. And there are objective facts that you cannot deny. There are objective facts that you cannot deny. So I try to sort of fit in those facts where I can. I'm not trying to go after anybody, but if I disagree with something, I'll let it be known. But Dre, before I get off, a lot of people, by the way, I know you got a lot of basketball left in you, but a lot of people have said to me, you and Draymond need to do the version of the Manning brothers Monday Night Football when Draymond's retired. So just keep that in mind in 5 years or 6 years, whenever you're done, all right?
I'll definitely keep that in mind, man. I know today you going at Stephen A., who I love, man.
Oh,
he's brother.
Yeah, I said this on my, so I recorded the intro to our podcast for this week, and we touched on a little, Tommy brought it up. Mm-hmm. And I said this, man, like Stephen A., I think is one of, if not the most talented person on television, sports, politics, entertainment. He has a real talent. It has been so entertaining for me and truthfully, like, enjoyable to sit across the table from him. I've known Stephen for a long time. We all have. Mm-hmm. You have a conversation with him off air. Soon as we hear that 10-second mark, he goes into character. And it's a tornado, and it is so beautiful to watch, and it's very rewarding to be on screen with him and to be able to chat hoops with him.
No, that's beautiful. I think I've had a similar experience in working with Chuck. Like Chuck,
yes.
Chuck fucking sits there and texts. He sits there and talks shit. Like, I mean, it's the game's going on. You're kind of sitting in the back. I'm sitting there watching, taking notes, jotting stuff down in my phone, sending stuff to the producer, getting ready for my segment. Chuck's over here fucking watching a dating show. And I'm like, this fucking guy's sitting here watching a dating show. And meanwhile, he's going to go out here. We're going to talk basketball, and he knows everything that's going on. It's like this uncanny ability that they have, and extremely honored to work alongside a guy like that as you working alongside Stephen A. But as far as that, and I'll let you out of here, as far as that Manning brother, Eli and Peyton, obviously I did that a few days or last week. And I mean, it was incredible. Number one, I'm fucking sitting on TV talking to Peyton and Eli Manning. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that in itself was incredible for me. But I watched the game last night. I watched who was playing? Whoever was playing last night. I watched that game. I watched the Peyton and Eli cast. I didn't even watch the normal broadcast. That's so entertaining. And I think you're on to something, JJ. I would love to sit there, talk sports with you, talk that actual game with you, but also just talking sports. I think it's beautiful. I think we have two totally different perspectives, whereas yours coming from I'm more of a playmaker, do all the dirty work. You're coming off lighting everybody up. So I think our perspectives would match, and I would be honored to sit in a room with a GOAT like yourself and talk basketball, man.
We'll make it happen.
Absolutely. But JJ, I can't thank you enough for coming on this week's episode of the Draymond Green Show. I am looking forward to coming on Old Man in the 3. We'll talk some more shit. We'll talk a bunch of basketball. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks a lot for coming on, JJ.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, Dre. Appreciate it, man.
No problem. Thank you.